significant enough. So I had, I started thinking about, okay, what are you gonna find on a pile of rocks in the water? Were you gonna have stakes? You're gonna have other trees? But I also thought about having a channel marker. So if you know a little bit about navigational aspects, you know that somewhere over here there's deep water and there's a green marker that says stay between the red and the green. Red right returning as you're coming in. So that's
red and green, and then red is on your right.
Return.
red right returning.
Yeah.
So if you're coming in, the red's on your right. If you're going out, the red's on your left.
Oh, I've never heard that I'm a boat person.
It
I've been on other people's boats, but I just never knew that. Okay, that's good to know.
So this is the one we're going to do today. Here's the big sketch of it. I hope you all have your sketch already on your paper.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have to worry about doing any of that. You got your sketch? Okay.
Well, I'll just, yeah.
Okay,
Basic.
when we left, I tried to tantalize you a little bit. Because we were talking about color theory. We were talking about purple and yellow being complementary colors, and thereby, when they mix together, you can get something that's very dull, even brown or muddy-like. And so I said, well, how did I do that? Well, I'm going to show you. The way this works is you can take raw sienna and put it in the sky, and the other colors will not interact with it as if it's yellow, the primary color. So raw sienna. Raw ochre will be kind of the same. The distinction between raw sienna and yellow ochre is that raw sienna is more transparent. So that's why I prefer raw sienna. But it's, in most people's mind, it's kind of a wash. So I'm going to take this down temporarily. I'll put it back up in a minute. But what I want to do now is we're going to do the sky wet on wet as we did the last time. So let's get some brushes going here. Okay, what I want to do before I wet the paper is I want to get my colors ready to go. We were talking about that last time. If you're not ready to go with your colors, the paper's going to probably dry to a point where you don't feel comfortable, and you have to re-wet it again. So, an interesting variation on blue-violet, also known as purple in the infantry. So I'm going to take some purple and get it on my palette. That's probably good. Okay. And now next to the purple, I'm going to put in raw sienna. I'm sorry, raw sienna comes next. Cerulean blue. I'm going to mix them together, get kind of a cool blue color. So that's ready to go. And now cleaning brushes and all, I'm going to come in with the raw sienna. And the raw sienna is going to be very watery. And the reason it's going to be very watery is because, as we were talking last class, I want it to be light. So we're talking about value last class, and to make a color lighter, you add water in watercolors, as opposed to adding white paint with oils and acrylics. So, what I'm going to do here, shut these down for a second. Because I want to flip this. I'm going to show you what I mean here. So I'm going to, I'll flip it now. I'm going to allow gravity to help me out on this painting, especially since it's vertical. So, clean water, going to start at the horizon. I'm going to go around. I'm going to leave the tiki hut dry. I get the water going. top to bottom, gravity assists bringing that bead of water down, all the way down to here. And likewise, it will do that with the paint. So when I come in with raw sienna on the horizon, it's going to come down. So raw sienna. Pick up a little bit darker. Just a little bit. Now I'm going to flip. See how gravity is helping me here? Now it's going to help me in the other direction, because I'm going to come in with this cool blue color, which is blue violet and cerulean. Big strokes. I'm going to put a little bit of that down here, just below the horizon, but not touching where it's wet. So let me see. Let me take a quick gander here. A little darker. There we go.
It's dramatic.
So a little bit more of that. And now, once again, gravity is going to help, because it wants to run downhill. Help it a little bit. And so, there you go. There's the sky. Now, you're going to want to let this dry flat.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'll continue to flow one way or the other. So if you let it dry flat, then it'll be good. Now, you may not have noticed, but I just noticed it. But I got a little raw sienna in the tiki, and I'm just going to lift that a little bit with dry Kleenex. So one more time. There we go. And I'll put it back up in a half a sec. Let me
Wow.
let me put this up, and I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds, and then I'll put that back up when I'm sure that it's not going to flow downhill.
Okay.
So raw sienna, and then ultramarine blue. Stop. I need Frank to help me here. I need blue violet and cerulean blue, and the mixture is kind of like 2 to 1. 2 being the purple, and 1 being the cerulean blue. So once again, let's see. That's looking okay. I want to bring one more thing to your attention, and that is that when I mixed the purple and the cerulean, I didn't stir it so it all became a single color, every molecule exactly the same color and shade. What I did was I mixed it enough just to get what I wanted, and then the brush picked up varying amounts of each color, and then when it's applied to the paper, you get this little bit of variation between one color and the other, and that's how that comes. And using the brush strokes, the large and sweeping brush strokes, left a little bit of light in the sky, which makes it look more like a sky instead of a wall. The more you paint the sky, going back and forth, 2 bad things happen. One is the sky becomes uniformly the same color, which makes it flat. And then secondly, you start taking paint off the paper. And so you get this grainy effect. Because as the paint comes off the paper, it comes off, if you think about watercolor paper like an English muffin, you're going to be taking paint off the top of the muffin, and in the little valleys, the paint remains, and you get this speckle effect.
Okay.
So There we go. So paint ready before you wet the paper, and then once you do, go for it. Turning it upside down to allow the raw sienna to flow from the horizon up. Man, I'm disappointed in these people.
I know, it's not like an 8 o'clock class when you're in college. You have to set an alarm.
Hey Ed, would you do me a favor and show me the finished painting? I'm gonna get a zoom in on a close-up of it.
Sure.
Nice.
So this doesn't look very yet.
It's going, and it's coming back down again. Okay, so now
That was
you
magical.
can manipulate that the way you want.
Wow.
Would you like to borrow mine, Leonard? If you may not need it, I don't know. It depends on you. Okay. They don't want to blend. So having a fine mist bottle and hitting it with that, using gravity to help you as you tilt the board one way or the other, it will flow naturally. And it's a great example of watercolor's ability to paint itself.
Yeah, I have a bottle. I just didn't think about using it, and I was like, I don't want to overpaint this, but that was cool. That was so cool.
Very nice.
I know. It was like you touched it and it turned magic.
Watercolor magic
I
at your
know.
service.
It's like when my son-in-law looks at my computer, all he has to do is ding, and oh. Okay.
Very cool. That's a great look in the sky. Now you want to let it dry flat,
Oh,
unless you
okay.
want it to, not a problem.
So should I wait a minute?
No.
Okay.
But just think about it for a second. I didn't put it in there because I didn't want, this was all really wet. And I didn't want it to bleed up, because that's probably what would have happened. In your case, it bled down.
Okay.
Now, having a little bit of reflection of the sky in the water, it's not bad at all. It's a good idea.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
Just attempt at foliage. And once again, I'm using the two colors of ultramarine blue deep and Booker's green deep, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of yellow, but instead of mixing the yellow into the other paints on the palette, I'm going to introduce yellow onto the paper so it mixes there. Okay, so I'm using a round brush initially. That's probably dry enough, so. Gonna go a little, gonna add a little more color, a little bit of blue in there. Gonna come back, add a little bit more green. Trying to keep the colors as fresh as possible as I do this. And then cleaning the brush again. I'll come back in with some yellow and introduce some yellow into this. Just a couple of spots. We'll darken that up a little bit later. Okay. Now we've got this rather exotic and unusual looking palm tree, and I'm going to use ultramarine blue and burnt sienna again. I saw this in a picture. This palm tree is really unique because it's got this one frond that's doing this. So let's see what we can do here. Let's go a little bluer.
Is that still the round brush?
This is the number 16 round brush. And as I've done before, I introduce some yellow. As we did on the last painting, we're gonna darken these trees up a little bit. Now I got a bead of water right here. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the tip of a thirsty brush, and you hear that sucking sound? Okay, so that was gonna be a disaster. That would be where additional things would have to be put in just to, or I would try to, a bit more green. I try to add something in its place. So this is kind of a gnarly looking trunk coming down like this.
Huh.
Don't ask me what kind of palm tree this is, because I do not know. Okay, so same series of colors. Just want to orient myself correctly on the sketch and the sample painting. Okay. Introduce some more yellow into the mix. What I want to do here is I want one mistake that I've often made is when I'm putting foliage behind a building, that foliage, the top of the foliage is exactly the same distance from the roof.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got the roof and then the foliage, and it looks incredibly artificial. So what I'm trying to do is to break up that top line a lot. So it doesn't appear to be kind of weird. So just taking the tip of the brush and putting leaf-like structures, if you will, freshening the color. Lay down behind it like that. Got some more yellow. Okay. I'm going to leave it at that. We've got some more palm trees to put in, but I don't want to get so far ahead of you that the initial approach is lost in translation, so to speak. Okay. I see another bead. Thirsty brush, get it wet with clean water, take most of the water out of it, and just touch it. So the water wicks right up into the brush. You can't do it with a wet brush because it's already full, so if you wick it up with a thirsty brush, you'll be far more effective.
And if you did it with a Kleenex, it would probably leave a color on the hut, right?
Well, it's lifting, basically. Taking color off the paper
Okay.
is lifting. And you can do it a lot of different ways, but if you've got something that's very small
Uh-huh.
and you want to get that little drop off, if you were to touch it with a Kleenex, the downward pressure would
Oh,
put it left, right, up, and down, and you would have something you didn't want. Thirsty brush is the best way to do it precisely. So it comes up.
okay.
So, same color pattern, a selection of colors. I mean, ultramarine blue deep and purplish green deep. Okay. Then I'm gonna drop in a little bit of yellow. So, this guy's kind of out of the painting, and that's done on purpose.
Which one?
Sometimes when you put something out of the painting, it provides. It's like everything's in the painting. It's like you just pack the suitcase, you know, and it's got limits. If it's a little bit out of the painting in some respects, then there's potentially a story there, like this one. That's the red marker. The green marker has got to be over here, so there's a little bit of a story going on. So I'm going to take with the number 16 round brush. I'm going to go high on this guy. And he's going to be a big fella. Let's go a little bit more blue, changing color as I go along. So palm trees react to two forces of nature. One is wind, a little bit of yellow now, and the other is gravity. So if you try to capture the effects of those elements, you're going to get really close to it. And you know what? This isn't photography. Who cares what kind of palm tree that is? It's a friggin' palm tree, man. You know, let's don't sweat the small stuff, right? I'm gonna go a little greener. This is why you've got test strips, so you can take a look at what's going on with your paint before you put it on the paper. I'm gonna leave that guy right there. Okay, here we go. Next fella. Same colors. Kind of want to be careful. I don't want to do a lot of pinwheel effects here. Add some yellow. Just a little bit. One more guy over here. Green. So the tip of the brush, you get the rib of the frond, and then with you go in and put in the fronds themselves as you go through. Okay, it's similar to what we got before. A little more yellow up and through here, just like that. Let's see, I always forget the boots. Those are where the branches have fallen off, and you get these, especially wild palm trees. These things. There we go. Chip the brush. And we're going to come back in and we're going to add darks to all of that, because at some point very soon we're going to have to recognize that the sun is out here, and we have to know where the darks are going to go in relation to the sun. We talked about that last class. Sun's over here, shadows are in that direction. The good news is we don't have to scrape anything. So, but we are going to use another technique called the dry brush technique, which I'll get into after you get caught up here. I'm going to do it on this one because I'm going to introduce it. It's something called dry brush. It doesn't mean that the brush is dry. It basically means that it's dry enough with a light gesture on the palette, on the paper, that we were talking about watercolor paper being an English muffin. It'll just scoot across the top. And when it does that, then you get this speckled effect, almost like pavement. And I'll show you what I mean. So I've got raw sienna on the palette. I'm gonna charge that up. A little bit of yellow has just flown into it, but I'm not going to worry about it. So the brush stroke is going to help me with creating dimension. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water out of the brush, and I'm going to start here. And this is kind of a little hill. So there we go. That's what I'm looking for. See that? See the dry brush effect?
It's a real light touch to your hand too.
Very light touch, yeah. And it's not back and forth, back and forth. See, that brush stroke says there's elevation here. And that's all we're gonna worry about. Now I'm gonna do it up here. And I'm gonna take two pure colors, raw sienna and burnt sienna. And this is where the dry brush can be put to really good effect. Because what you want to do is you want to give the illusion of palm fronds or straw or something like that up here in the hello. Let's get these babies out so I see exactly what I want to see. So I'm going to start right up here at the top. I'm going to come down fairly quickly. That's a little too quick, but it's not a problem. So now for raw sienna, taking water out of the brush by using this paper, this toilet roll over here. And that is kind of like what I want. And then this coming off the edge here, and we'll play with that a little bit later. But that's all I want. That's all I want to do is dry brush here, a little bit down here, a little bit down here. Oh, by the way, do you notice that's the watermark for the paper? When you get to the point where you've got a piece of paper that's got the watermark on it, put it on the bottom. Don't put it in the air. Because you can sign over that, or it makes more sense to have it legible instead of being upside down. That could make the difference between a great painting and one that never sells. If you had this thing sitting up here in the sky. Right? Okay. That's all there is to it.
Good tip.
Dry brush effect. And here's what you want to do. If you want to get your test strip, do you still have yours, or you want another one?
No, I have one.
Okay, what you want to do is you want to practice it on the test strip and make sure that you've got basically the technique down. It's a light touch and not a lot of water in the brush. Just paint. And then go from there. The shack itself. And to do that, what I want to
Definition
do is
into
I'm
the
going to
shack.
take a 1/2 inch flat brush. And I'm going to mix together some burnt sienna and some ultramarine blue. I need all these colors on my palette, so I'm going to have to find a spot for this mixture. Once again, side by side, instead of one end to the other. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do with the flat brush, so I'm going to take the chisel edge, and I'm going to, once again, it's the Father Christmas look. Ed's retirement home. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the chisel edge, not the flat edge, but the chisel edge, and I'm going to start cutting out some of these fronds like this. I want a finer, a little bit thinner brush than that. And then down here, I'm going to put in some shadows coming down. So I want these things to be a point. Take some clean water. I'm just going to blend this shadow color down. It's a little browner than I initially expected. So let me add a little bit more ultramarine blue to this. Making it a little darker. A little more black. I'm going to clean the brush, take some clean water, and I'm going to wet the paper down here. I'm just going to bleed this color down like that. Okay, there's my shadows. Now, not quite done yet, because I want to take a rigger brush. Coming back to the same mixture of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and I'm going to start extending these breaks.
And you just bringing that up, dragging it up into it?
Yeah.
Yep. So he's bringing that up and dragging it up into it.
You see it?
See him over here. See it.
There we go. So I've got these little pointed areas down through here. Okay.
That's cool how he just drug that up from the paint.
So now what I want to do, you always have these cross pieces on the top. And this is a good time to take care of them. But remember, we were talking about ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. You can go from a dark brown to a brownish gray to a bluish gray to almost a blue-black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go towards the brown side of this. So I got a dark brown, which I don't have to go out and purchase. And I'm just going to go ahead and put in, following the angle of the roof, these braces, or whatever they're, I'm sure there's a name for them, but I don't know off the top of my head. Just using the flat brush and just creating, just with a couple of swipes. And of course there's always a piece that meets it. I didn't do it on the smaller painting, but on the bigger painting, makes sense, like that. Okay, so there's the roof and the shadows, and we are not quite done with it, but
So you painted this, and then you just added water to the.
yeah, what I did was I got the darks going under here, and then I came down about that far, and then wet the paper underneath it with clean water, and then let it bleed down.
Okay.
And that's, once again, gravity's helpful when you do that.
Yeah, and then you brought the dark color up into the top to make the lines.
Yeah, and while we're talking about that, let me just take a round brush real quick. I'm gonna come into the same mixture, and I'm gonna go kind of dark. And I'm just going to put in a window there.
Windows, doors.
Something of a door. I didn't square it off because that gives an illusion that, and we'll put a little color in there. There's some grasses in front like that. So, oh yeah, it's big enough for another window, right? There we go. Of course, if it really was a burnt sienna and raw sienna, I want to put a little bit more detail right here. Not so much going over what I've done, and just adding a little bit more definition to the fronts coming down. See, that needs to come in. So we're going to do that when we get some more darks going up here. As a matter of fact, let me think. Why don't I just go ahead and start doing that? So, gonna come back into our mixtures of Hooker's Green Deep and Ultramarine Blue. I'm gonna start thinking about putting in some darks. When we put in the shadows, we're gonna get a lot more depth to what's going on. So what I was talking about is right here. This needs to come down this way a little bit. See, that gives it more of a sense of perspective, I think, than what I had before. Now, there's a reason why I'm going really dark next to the white wall. If you put your darkest dark next to the lightest light, you get a little bit more drama out of the painting. If you paint everything the same value, same intensity of color throughout the painting, it lacks the kind of interest that you can generate by putting in the darks. And the darks are almost always the last thing that you do. So as I put these darks in, I'm going to be mindful of a couple of things. First thing is, I don't want to cover up everything I've already done. I want to enhance it. But I also want to remember, the second thing is, where's the sunlight coming from? Well, it's coming from back here, right? So let's just go ahead and think about where the darks are going to be, especially in the foliage and on the trees. So you figure the darks in the foliage are going to be on the opposite side of the sunlight, and then down below. Once again, put these babies on so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm not covering up what I've already done, just trying to enhance it a little bit. So that yellow behind the darks creates depth, because it's a lighter value. Darker values against lighter values always creates the appearance of depth. Now this tree. Some darks underneath. And then on the back side of some of these fronds. I've got a hard edge right there. So I'm looking for a brush. Here it is. I'm gonna take a clean brush, clean water, and I'm just going to blend that in so these darks look like they are part and parcel of the foliage and not something that's been put on with tape. Because if it's hard edge all the way around, it looks like it's been applied artificially. So this crazy little trunk right here, that's going to have some darks on the opposite side like that. Clean the brush. Get most of the water out of the brush when you do that. That way you don't get the puddle coming down. So the brush is damp. Damp enough to blend, but not so wet as to make it flow. Okay, freshening it up. Okay, these guys up here, start up top. Eyes on the opposite side of the sun are going to be actually a little darker. clean water. Take most of the water out of the brush. Blend some of these. Okay. Trump cylindrical. So the shadows are going to be bled in such a way. See, right now that's a hard edge. That hard edge basically tells you or implies that there's a right angle. So if I take the blending brush and just touch that line, what I do is I blend it. So it's a hard edge to the outside, soft edge to the inside, and that gives the illusion of the trunk being naturally cylindrical. So kind of play with this fellow. Down through here. Now that's a little thicker, so you can see the effect when it gets blended. Soften some of that. Play with this fellow too. Freshen up the color. So you can see a hard line in the center of the trunk. Clean brush, clean water, and just blending that line down. So now I've got what I think is a more realistic, blending up top, a more realistic depiction of a cylindrical palm tree trunk. So let's come down through here. And once you think you've got the darkest dark, let it dry a little bit. Then you're going to find out that maybe it can be darker. So those are some interesting plants growing there, but they're, once again, they appear to have been glued on. And if I soften, especially the base of them, they just look like they're coming right out of the foliage as opposed to being stuck on with a piece of tape. I'm gonna go through this pretty quick because there's a lot here, and this is all about you painting and not me. If I want to perfect this, I can take the time and do it at home. So I'm just gonna blend some of that out a little bit, and I'm gonna stop there. Okay, and I'm going to lift that mark as best I can. Clean water, clean brush, and just lift it. Taking the water out of the brush. It's almost clean. Can't tell. So, to that end, what I need to do is think about making that roof a little bit more obvious, coming out this way. See what that looks like back up here. I'm dancing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little better. Not great. Not as good as the other one. When I stood back after I did the roof, I thought, I really wanted to get that, and I didn't. Just do straight. So this now is the award winner, if there is one. Smaller one? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Smaller one? Yeah. I like the shack and the smaller one a lot better. Yeah. It's just not following the sketch that well, but that's the one thing, you know, you can draw it, but then you got to paint it, and Yeah, no, we'll see. We're not totally gonna give up on it. But, so you're all doing your darks, right? Yeah. And you're, okay, so you're working, you got the darks in. More darks can be applied to make it more interesting, but I'm not gonna do that because this is all about what you're doing. But what I wanna do is, unlike I did with this one, when I finished this, I went back and I looked at it and I said, you know what? These shadows really should be more in line with the color of the purple and the cerulean blue in the sky. So that's what I'm going to attempt on this painting here. Instead of using this, I'm going to use this. So. So we've got, still have that mixture from the sky. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow, everything's got to go there. Follow the form of the sand dune that I created with the dry brush and raw sienna. And I'm going to stop there and wet the paper. I'm going to blend these shadows down a little bit. Wet the paper. Bring the shadows down. Lift that up. And so I see I've got a little bit of a hard edge down here, a little bit of a bead. So I'm just taking the Kleenex and just lifting it up. Okay, so now over here, let's see. Yes, a little bit more. There we go. Water. All the shadows, if they're going to fall in the same direction. Like that. The color is just a little off. You have a little bit more purple to it. There we go. Still not purple enough for this. So what we got going on over here? I'm going to put some of this up in there. Variety of color right through there. Now, so now we got this big old palm tree is going to be coming back. Like this. Like soften that.
A little dabbing.
Yeah, just lifting the paint off a little bit. Should have waited till that dried a little bit more because I don't have a distinct edge, but that's okay. Now over here on the building itself, let's just put some shadows like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do that. And same over here. A little lighter. So that's shadows of all of this stuff falling on the shack. Well, this didn't turn out any better than this one did. I thought it would, but it was too wet. So maybe I can come back in, or what I can do is I can demonstrate another repair technique, and that's called the magic toothbrush. So this is a clean toothbrush, and it's wet. And I'm just going to come in here, I'm just going to scrub this baby.
Another important reason to have good paper. Another good important reason to have good paper.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, if you were doing with student quality paper, there's real cheap stuff, you'd be digging a hole right through here.
Mm-hmm.
There, it's gone, kind of. So it's fun when Ed makes a couple of mistakes, that way we can show how to fix them when you're home and ending a class. Let me just do a couple of things here real quick. I noticed that in my haste to get on with this, these darks right here should really kind of bring this all the way down. Basically, that's right about there. So that pops the shack a little bit. Okay. So I got this tree, that's dry enough. Let's see what we can do now. Break it up a little bit by just touching it. That's the shadow that I was hoping to get before, but the paper was too wet. It wasn't going to give me precise lines. I do that to myself all the time at home because I'm so impatient to get on to the next step. And so it's goofy. Anyway, so we've got some foreground. And what I'm going to do on the foreground is I'm going to go, we were talking about warm colors. Remember in the foreground, creating a sense of dimension? So let me just go ahead and put this kind of a warm yellowish green in here, like that. A little bit of dry brush maybe. And then I'm going to come in with ultramarine blue or sienna. Just for the chisel edge of the brush, put in some foliage. And I'm doing this real fast because this isn't about me finishing a painting or trying to perfect it. I'm just trying to show you what's going on. So now I can take a round brush, and here and there I can give myself some foliage or grasses coming up. Add some more blue just to make it a little bit change in color as I go along like that. Now, there's more to be done to that, obviously darks and such. But what that does is it creates, you can see the warmth in here, brings it forward. Now what we've got is the need for some texture. And I've done this before, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna come in with some burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue that's left on the palette, and I'm gonna take the brush, magic toothbrush, and I'm gonna put in some texture. This technique really gives the illusion of sand. And if I decide that I want to emphasize the shadows a little bit, what I can do is I can put in a bigger speck, like right here, like that. So that could be a rock, but if it throws a shadow like that, it's even more of a rock. Let's do another one, kind of like over here. Needs to be a little darker. Here we go. I'm just going to drag the edge of that rock and bring it back in the same direction as the shadows. A little bluer. A little bluer. There we go. There. So, we forgot all about the ocean. Holy cow. Let's just take the same sky color and just parallel the horizon with the point of a round brush and just put in some waves and stuff like that. And the only other thing that I would do, and I didn't do it in the other painting or the small demo painting, was to add a few birds in the air. So once again, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, get a nice dark, and try to do this without putting my wrist in the painting. So one check, wait a minute. He's a big one, smaller one, and then one out here on the horizon like that. Here we go.
Lovely.